Welcome to the HRIS Careers Podcast with your host, Troy Wallace, a podcast for human resources information systems professionals to help you elevate your HRIS career. We always say no one gets into HRIS on purpose, but it sure is interesting to find out how they did. We interview your HRIS peers to find out how they got tricked into the industry and what lessons and tools they use to progress their careers along the way. We discuss industry trends, AI, and even talk candidly about all the most popular HRIS platforms. Just think of it as the closest bar just outside the entrance of your favorite HR technology conference. Now you get it. Welcome in. Welcome to the HRIS Careers Podcast, recording live in our studios in beautiful downtown Omaha, Nebraska. So before we get to our guest today, I wanted to take a quick aside. So you may have listened to our last episode, which was on the layoffs at UKG. We got a great response, people emailing about it. And we actually had a few people come forward with some really intimate knowledge of what went on. So a lot of it was confirming some of the things in the podcast. But if you do want to hear more about that, certainly let me know in the comments or directly at troy.wallace@HRIScareers.com. It's TROY.WALLACE@HRISCareers.com. And we would consider digging into that even a little more deeply. So great response, and certainly appreciate anybody that contacted us directly after that. So on with today's show. Our guest, again, we've outkicked our coverage again. Our guest is Nick Day. He is the CEO of JGA Recruitment that specializes in payroll and HRIS recruiting. His roots are really in payroll recruiting, and he may have what I think I would consider the most popular payroll podcast, aptly named. The Payroll Podcast, you can find it on Apple and all the popular services. He also has another podcast called the HR L&D Podcast that caters a little more to the HR community. I found the Payroll Podcast about 8 months ago. At this point, I find it required listening if you want to stay up to date with payroll technology and different issues in the industry. Nick is based in the UK, but his podcast is really a great mix of international guests, and there's also a lot of content that really makes sense for people that are US-based as well. Again, I would consider it required listening if you're in the payroll or HRIS industry. He is a prolific content creator and has expanded his payroll and HRIS recruiting business to the United States this year. This was a ton of fun. We actually did a swap where I appear on his podcast that should be coming out later this year. It was a very gracious offer on his behalf. I can only dream of the HRIS Careers Podcast having the reach and impact of either of his podcasts, so I certainly appreciate that. We really try and up the video game on this one, so please go over to YouTube /@HRISCareers and check it out and subscribe. It certainly helps us a lot. You'll also be able to see the HRIS analyst job that was posted for $700,000 if you go over to YouTube. All right, here are 3 gigantic things you're going to learn in today's episode. Number 1. What Nick views as the number 1 skill set in demand right now in the payroll and HRIS industries. Number 2. His keys to success in payroll recruiting. Now, I consider this a mini masterclass, a great listen whether you're recruiting payroll, HRIS. It really applies to a lot of other industries as well. And number 3. How to get a free valuation of your value in the market versus your current compensation. If you're in the payroll HRIS, you kind of offer that up on the fly when we're in the podcast. If I were you out there and you had some question about your value, I would take him up on that. Again, a great guest. All the resources and links that we speak about will be in the show notes or in the description, depending on whether you're getting this on YouTube or one of the podcast players. So please enjoy this wide-ranging conversation with Nick Day. Nick Day, welcome to the HRIS Careers Podcast. We really appreciate you being here. I know it's getting late in the day there in the UK. Number 1, I just wanted to thank you for your payroll podcast and a quick compliment. One of the episodes I did previously was with Lou Salage, and he was talking about some UKG things. And the only reason I knew what he was talking about was because I'd listened to an episode of your podcast. So I really appreciate you doing that. I will have done your introduction, so people have already heard that. But can you give us the quick version of how did you originally get into payroll and then more specifically, the recruiting side?
Sure. Look, very, very quickly, I studied a degree and a master's in the world of theatre. Initially, I wanted to be a budding actor and get involved in the theatre space, but I, like many others, accrued a huge amount of university debt. We're going back 22, 23 years now. What I'd like to say, though, is I chose payroll, and I really want people to own it. A lot of people say they fell into payroll as if it's like a place we don't want to be. I absolutely love this industry. I'm very proud that I chose to enter the world of payroll, but I chose to enter the world of payroll recruitment. So I had a lot of debt, and over 30,000 at the time, a lot of money back then. And I was offered several positions in recruitment with different firms, but the one that really spoke to me was the payroll industry. And the reason for that, my manager back in the day, a guy called Scott, said to me, Nick, if you come into the world of payroll, it's really going to build on your experience of working with people. The payroll people are often, the calls they get typically back in 20 years ago, the call they got was someone complaining about their pay. They're not expecting your call, which is actually to say, hey, you're doing a great job. Tell me about your challenges. They need someone to listen to them. And that's what you need to do in this type of recruitment. So I turned down the other offers, which were, one was in tech recruitment, which is all about skills. One was in accountancy recruitment. And you know what? I didn't know anything about payroll, but I definitely chose the industry, and I fell in love with it very quickly, got promoted through that business very fast. Within 2 years, I was the most senior leader in that business, managing a team of 20 at that time for a different firm. And then in 2008, I decided to go and do it on my own. And again, chose payroll again. Why would I ever leave an industry that has given me so much? So very passionate about the industry, very passionate about recruiting great talent within the industry. And I know that if you get the talent bit right, payroll operations can do great things. So that's probably a whistle-stop version of how I got into the world of payroll. I got there through a big debt from having probably too much of a good time at university, and I've never left.
Well, we have similar paths then. I think, we talked on your podcast a little bit about that, and it's the same thing with me. I had $24,000 in a debt, and I had to get a job, and HR seemed to be the path to go into start making a paycheck. Huh. So I wish mine was a little more as thoughtful as yours, but I was just like, I got to make some money.
I think the good thing about recruitment is you're in control of it. So you run it like your own enterprise. Obviously, it is my enterprise now in terms of the business I run now, but even at the start, you get commission based on placements and service. And if you don't give a good service, if you don't build enough relationships, you don't make any commission and you can't get ahead of it. So I like the idea of being in control of my own destiny, my own outcome. And I put my head down. I worked incredibly hard, and I was very fortunate in many ways. But it's never, since joining the industry, I've never wanted to go back to acting as an example. I've never wanted to go and do anything else. I've just, doubled down on the payroll recruitment industry, and I've loved every minute of it.
Yeah, no, it's it is a skill set. So it is a much needed skill set. So we're appreciative that there are people out there like you that choose that profession and recruit to it. And that's going to get me into, I think I want this to be not maybe a therapeutic session.
Why don't you tell me why you think you need therapy?
I don't need therapy. I just told you that. It's for my friend.
I'm sorry.
You didn't hear me say that?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
You guys, you're supposed to be so good at listening, you can't even remember what I said to you 2 seconds ago.
So sorry. Why don't you just tell me about your friend?
But an educational session for recruiters in general. So
Sure.
We all know payroll and HRIS are tied at the hip. They interact a lot within organizations. And I think there's going to be some connective tissue between how you recruit. And, I've seen a lot of your stuff. And I feel like there's a lot of lessons that people that recruit payroll, and I know you are now recruiting HR and HRIS as well,
Sure.
and how to do that. So I'm going to get a little technical. And let's say you've intaken the job, and it is maybe a manager level payroll, or it could be an HRIS person. And you've got to think about, how am I going to entice somebody to be interested in this job if they're just looking at it in text? What are the important elements that you think you need to communicate in a job posting or something like that to get people interested in your job?
It's a great question. If you don't mind, I'd like to take it back a step, because I think that's the part that's missed in the process. So it was a great article written today by Max van der Klispersink, which many of your listeners may know. who's confirmed that he did a survey and 55% of the payroll leaders he spoke to said they have a real issue or challenges trying to recruit payroll talent, right? So in going back to your question very quickly, we're already in the engagement phase, but recruitment starts in the sourcing phase. When I say engagement, we're talking about enticing people. And I think this is where there's confusion, and this is where the challenge comes in, where a lot of organizations will say, hey, we don't need to use an external agency. And this is not a sell for me, giving you an idea where the landscape is, right? Maybe you're a hiring manager. You may say, I don't even need my internal talent team. I know payroll, so I can do this myself, right? And they'll go to their market. They'll use their LinkedIn network. They may go post an advert somewhere, and they'll look at the response that comes back. If you look at that as phase one, or as the simplest way of going to market as a hiring manager, typically the people that apply to your advert are going to be active job seekers, number one. So you're not necessarily going to be able to unearth or entice, in your words, the people that may be the best fit culturally, behaviorally, skill-wise, because they're already happy in employment and they're not even considering, and you can't unlock those people. So your search is going to be limited to your own network, and your network is going to be based on people you've worked with, not necessarily job seekers. So it's quite a limited way of recruiting, but you could certainly find people that way. A lot of people will go to phase two and they'll say, okay, we've got an internal talent team in our business, so we're going to utilize those professionals to find people for us. Internal talent have an incredibly difficult role that's often misunderstood by stakeholders. So an internal talent person has got to find talent for every part of that organization often. They've got to be experts in every sector, which of course is impossible. So I've got a procurement director saying I need a procurement specialist. I've got an FD saying I need someone in my account team. I've got a payroll leader saying I need a payroll person. A marketing they've got to manage all those different roles. And it's impossible for them to build a network that's niche enough to find the best talent in any of those sectors individually. But they have a broader network to tap into for finding, maybe first layer people and slightly more people than a hiring manager. And this lies into the question you just asked me now. How do we entice people? So I would argue that hiring managers and talent people can often find talent, but that's only half the battle. The real game, the real challenge in recruitment isn't just finding people, it's then engaging with them. How do we get that individual to engage with us to show genuine interest in the vacancy that we want to put forward to them? So back to your question, how do we make something stand out? I mean, it's a whole podcast in itself. You've got EVPs, you've got certain things that will resonate with certain people and others. But ultimately, when you've been immersed in the space as you have for 30 years, Troy, right? You know that if a hiring manager came to you with a challenge, you would know the intricacies of that role inside and out. The job spec is part of it. You wouldn't probably even need the job spec. You'd ask some intelligent questions. You'd know immediately what kind of person will fit that role. I guess we've got to that point in what I do, having done this for 22 years. When we get a job spec in my team, we kind of understand the nuances that role will require and the potential levers we'll need to press to find the right person. And we've got many levers we can press and many talent pools we can delve into. So we're not restricted to LinkedIn. We've got online channels, we've got offline channels, we can use WhatsApp groups, we've got podcast audiences and so on and so forth. So I think it starts with a really thorough understanding of the industry. If you gave me a procurement role, I'd be no better than an internal talent person or hiring manager. It's not my niche. I wouldn't know where to start. So I'd do the same things everyone else does. I'd place an advert. I'd probably write a text that isn't that enticing because I wouldn't know what appeals to those people. And I'd look on LinkedIn and I may or may not get lucky. Doesn't mean I can't place the position, but I'm kind of shooting fish in a barrel a little bit. When it comes to payroll, I know the industry inside and out. So we know which levers to pull. That make sense?
Yes, absolutely. And my guess is because, and this is, I'm sure the reason why people come to you is you've got a network, a big network, and probably quite quickly, like the original AI is our brains, right? So somebody comes and says, hey, I'm looking for this type of thing. You're already probably filtering through like, okay, in my thing, I got 7 people that are probably interested or might be interested in this role. This is a pet peeve of mine because it's either a fit or it's not a fit, sometimes on compensation. How quickly do you come to that conversation? I mean, I know within your network, you probably have an idea of, I know these 13 people are top tier and they're not moving for less than $250,000 a year. But how quickly do you have that conversation? 'Cause again, my pet peeve is that you're talking to somebody and it's just, if it pays this, I'm probably interested or it's in the ballpark.
If it's under that, we're wasting our time here.
I think the biggest P for me is incorrect benchmarking, particularly for payroll. And if you look at any of the benchmarking reports that come out, they'll say payroll manager needs to be paid this, but a payroll manager has so many nuances and intricacies to it. Is it a payroll manager of a sole function? Is it a payroll manager of 25 staff? You payrolling people on a monthly basis? Have you got multi-frequency? Is it global? To say a payroll manager in this state or this country is worth this is, for me, it's a foolish place to start, because you need to understand specifically how complex that role is in order to accurately benchmark it. But I certainly have a frustration sometimes when we get job specifications from talents and from HR functions where they go, this is where we've benchmarked it and this is what it should pay. And I say, well, you're not going to get the right person. I'm always very transparent. For that salary, for that compensation, if you want the best candidate, I can't help you with that. That is not enough. The second thing is benchmarks for salaries are often aimed at what the market would need to pay if you're finding an active candidate. But sure, if you're working in a role and you're really, really happy, why would you move for the same? So compensation definitely plays a part. If I want to get the best person for the role and you are that best person, I'm going to have to give you some upside on what you're already earning. So even if the benchmark is correct, it's not often enough to get the best talent. So it's difficult because clients will think we're trying to push salaries up because there's a commercial return for us. But in the flip side, if you want the best talent, sometimes you've got to pay a little bit more. However, what I will say is payroll people in particular don't tend to move just for financial reasons. Most people leave because they're unhappy with something in the management, with the culture, with the work-life balance. My job is to understand what those levers are. So when I speak to an individual like yourself, try to say, look, what is he looking for? What have you got that's going really well in your role at the minute that would absolutely you'd need to maintain? What are the things you don't get at the moment? You might say, Nick, on a Thursday, I've got to commute to the office, an hour and a half each way. I can't take my kids to football or whatever it is. They're the things I need to understand. So the first thing I would come to you if I had a position because I know you wouldn't be to say, hey, Troy, I've got a position. It's paying $10,000 more than you want at the moment. It'd be, hey, Troy, I've got a position. It's on your doorstep. You don't have to travel on a Wednesday. It's going to give you 3 hours back with your kid. You can do the things you want to do. And by the way, compensation is here. So it's a different conversation. And that does come back to knowing your candidates, knowing your industry. Great example in the UK, the first ever equitable partner for a top 5 firm. She's working there now. Her name's Maria Mason. She's at BDO. I met with a senior partner at BDO at an event, and he said, Nick, I've got this challenging role. If you know anyone that can do this position. And I had no idea if Maria was looking at that moment in time. She'll tell you the story. I said, look, I know what you're looking for is really difficult. You need someone with sales experience, with bid experience, with all these different things, management, high volumes. There's only one person in the industry in the whole of the UK that I think can do the job you're asking for. And this individual, and I don't know if she's looking. Lo and behold, I had a conversation with her. I said, Maria, I've got this opportunity. I know you're probably not looking, but these are all the things you said you wanted. She only interviewed one candidate. She got the job. She's been there now, 6-7 years, and she's turned that function and grown it exponentially for the firm. If you don't know your market, you can't make those suggestions. So I don't know if that answers your question, but payroll people in particular, I don't think move just because of compensation, but of course it forms part of a package.
Right. And I'm going to drill down and just compliment and then encourage the rest of the recruiters out there. When you are talking your clients off of their benchmarks because they just are not realistic, you're doing God's work. It's important because that is the bane of everybody who's out there. And, I have been contracting the HRIS world, and they come in and my conversation is with them. I said, you're not going to find anybody for that. Let me know in 6 weeks when they come up to this range. And I can't tell how many times I got called back in 6 weeks. Okay. Now they're there. And it's hard to educate them. That sometimes they got to get the hard knocks of realizing where you and I are in this every day of understanding what a skill set's worth. So I would say the only other thing, if you can do it, is put the number $700,000 in the salary range. So the true story, something came out from Netflix. It was a Workday analyst position, and the salary range was $100,000 to $700,000. That at least gets people's eyes open. It may not be truthful.
Yeah. Well, I think that's more linked to pay transparency, I think, where they've got to advertise a salary and they don't really want to tell people what they're paying. So they just make it a huge salary banding to capture everything and everything. So there's probably there's nefarious side to that kind of salary being advertised in that way, potentially. And obviously pay transparency is very, very important. What I would say is sometimes there's a fear for people to pay more because they're worried about how it may impact their own roles. So, we're too concerned at it being too close to my own salary, so we couldn't possibly do that. What I would say to someone is that you've got two challenges here. You need to disconnect them from being connected, from each other. One is you want to get the best person in. So this is where I'd benchmark it. If you do that, these are the kind of people we can send you. I can send you people at all salary levels, and you'll physically see the difference in what you get at different levels, right? In terms of expertise and fit and all the different things. But the other challenge, actually, if you feel it's too close, maybe you're underpaid as well. If you've come into that role on a benchmark that was incorrect in the first instance, why don't we work together? Tell me about your role first. I will be very happy to do a free evaluation of where I would benchmark your role in the current market for your state, for your country, for your skill set, for your specific payroll, and for what your qualifications, all those things, all those variables impact a salary. And I'll tell you what it is. I'll put it in writing. And if you want to go to your HR director or your finance director and say, hey, I've had a benchmarking report, I'm underpaid, or this is what my valuation is in the market, I'm looking for a raise, then you have the information from a very experienced consultant to back that up. But I think I wouldn't let that closeness deter you from hiring great talent, because you want to hire people that are better than you ultimately. You want everyone to be able to progress. You want a really compliant, accurate payroll function that works seamlessly. And that involves great talent, because payroll is complex and payroll is challenging.
Right. And I just want to remind everybody, his name is Nick Day, because that is an unbelievable offer. To have somebody of his caliber, be willing to do something like that to you and do that. That's awesome. Hey, I know we're short on time here, so I always do what I call the lightning round. We'll do an abbreviated version. I always put some imaginary time on the imaginary clock. And here we go. So these questions are not usually controversial, but if you want to pass, just say pass.
Okay.
So here's number one. This one shouldn't be too controversial. All right. Would you rather have the exclusive rights to place all payroll and HRIS positions for Apple, Google, and NVIDIA, or a 1% ownership in the Tottenham Spurs?
Oh, you brought Tottenham in, my love of my dream, my football club. No,
yeah,
you know
what? Make it easy.
No, that's fair. No, definitely be the first. It'll definitely be the first, right? And I'm not sure I fully love the way that Tottenham is run by Daniel Levy and the others anyway, and I'm not sure I'd want involvement in that. I'd definitely rather have exclusivity with those top players. Payroll's my life. Football's something that is a hobby. Payroll supports my family, supports the families of those that work for me, and that would have to come first and foremost.
But would the 1% ownership get you better seats?
It probably would get me better seats. Sometimes you don't want better seats when you're watching Tottenham. We're not doing that well at the moment.
Very excellent. All right, we'll move on to question number two. You're sitting in a position where you're seeing lots of positions come in and skill sets. What would you consider the hottest skill? And it can be, I guess, I don't want to give you ideas for the answer. So what is the hottest skill? And it could be a software-specific skill that is in demand in the HRS payroll world. People are coming to you for this type of skill set often, and it's hard to find. Do you have any ideas there?
Well, right now, Peter Tiliakos did a great study, first of its kind, big study in payroll, which talked about what was needed in the industry. And what he discovered from that study is 88% of payroll professionals right now are in the middle of some kind of transformation. Transformation skills in payroll, for me, is the most in-demand skill, the ability to move a payroll from its current state of play to the next state. And that doesn't necessarily mean a systems integration or a systems change. It can be an organizational transformation. It could be moving from domestic to global. But those transformation skills, those change skills, those change management skills, absolutely in demand. Payroll hasn't always been the fastest to adopt to change. It's often resistant to it. So those that embrace it and have the skills to make change happen, definitely in demand at the moment.
So maybe you see this. I know you probably do a lot of higher level executive payroll hiring, but from the mid-tier, are you seeing any particular software skill set? You're seeing a lot of SAP? Is it Workday? Is there anything that you're seeing that's becoming a little more dominant?
We've seen some shifts, is what I would say. We've seen a huge emergence in EOR providers, the likes of Remote.com, Deal, and Papaya. These are unicorn companies that have absolutely disrupted the space. In terms of software specifically, a couple of years ago, it was all Workday. That's definitely shifted. We've seen a lot more people now using platforms like UKG, Dayforce, a lot of emerging platforms we've probably never heard of that are more bespoke. So I wouldn't say there's one specific tech that's more in demand over another. Kind of depends on, because we're global recruitment, so we support clients in the UK, Europe, and the US. So it'd probably need to be country specific as to where you see those more specific skill sets. What I would say is there's definitely a huge demand at the mid-tier for payroll analytical skills. Someone that can really utilize data smartly to create better decisions, to automate tasks. And I think the data analysis and analytical skills are probably more in demand than ever at the mid-tier.
All right, that'll roll right into our last question.
3.
So I know you guys are open for business on the recruiting side for HRIS, HR, and payroll in the United States.
We are indeed. We launched in September last year. JGA Recruitment Inc. We're covering all states across the US. We're supporting a number of clients already. We've just actually added 3 new members to our team, so demand is high. I think the hardest thing for us is telling clients that we're there. We're the first ever specialist in the world of payroll to ever launch in the US, offering payroll-specific recruitment services. So a lot of people don't know we're there yet, so we're trying to get the name out. But for those that we're working with, it's working very well, and absolutely right. All levels, payroll administrator, right through to director, to implementation, to HRIS, to anything that touches payroll, we can support it.
Okay, well, here's the question then. And, if you want to pass because you don't want to make any enemies, you don't have to answer. What's your favorite city so far in the U.S. in your travels?
I think I know the answer to that. And I have to say at the moment, it's Nashville.
Yeah.
We're representing people there. I loved Austin. I'm going out again because we're out and back and forth UK and US regularly with the US launch. I'm going out to Arizona in October, over to Scottsdale and Phoenix. I'm very excited by that.
My
but
old
at the
stomping
moment,
ground.
Nashville's definitely edging it for me at the moment.
Yeah, I don't think I lived in Scottsdale, Phoenix for 12 years, and it's not going to beat Nashville.
Okay, interesting.
Especially if you go in the summer.
I'm a big music fan as well. I've played drums all my life, and I've been in bands and
great.
things. So Nashville was right up my street.
It's great. All right, well, I know we need to get you out of here. So that ends our lightning round. Why don't you tell, I'm just going to say you're a prolific content creator. I know you're traveling quite a bit to the United States and are just doing a lot of things. So I'm going to let you tell the audience, where's the best place to reach out if you're looking for payroll, HRIS folks. And then, I will have mentioned, obviously, all of your podcasts in the intro.
Yeah, super. So there's lots of places you can catch me. The best place is probably LinkedIn. If you follow me on LinkedIn or connect with me on LinkedIn, I'll always accept the request, providing you're working in the world of payroll or HRIS. I have a payroll newsletter that goes out as well, so you can subscribe to that, which is also on LinkedIn. On our website, which is JGARecruitment.com or JGARecruitmentinc.com, you can sign up to our weekly payroll newsletter. It goes out to 8,000 people. We've got the payroll podcast on there. We've got a free payroll salary calculator tool to find out what you're worth in the industry. You can email me direct to nick@jgarecruitment.com. I'm kind of like to be everywhere, so reach out on LinkedIn is probably the safest platform, and I'll always respond and come back.
Awesome. Hey, Nick Day, we really appreciate you being on the HRS Careers podcast. For the rest of the community, we'll talk to you all later.
Delighted to be here. Thank you ever so much, Troy.
You bet.
There we go.